So when you think about the fluid or the grace being pumped into those wings and those wings expanding, right? Yeah. Now, not a butterfly, but some of you saw my Facebook post yesterday that some baby birds were born in a little flower pot at my house. And so amazing that I looked at them and I went, these are new hatchlings, because they were still wet. Still wet. There was an egg, and 20 minutes later I went back and there's now 3 babies instead of 2. So it was like the hatching was happening right then. And their skin, the membrane of their skin, you talk about the vulnerability too, it was so transparent. I could see their heart beating and you could see organs. I mean, you know, there was no, I mean, baby birds are bald, I know, but they were just so fresh. They were naked. And that there's a vulnerability in that, but the grace is that there still is that process with us, right? As we would feather out from birds or have our wings like a butterfly filled and expand. Anything else? Why is the butterfly a symbol of the resurrection? A renewal, okay. What else?
Transformation.
Pardon? Being born again? Yeah, because the caterpillar is born again. And as a new creature.
Right.
Yeah, it's something new. Yeah.
Cave, or from the cave to the light, or
So from the tomb of the chrysalis to this new life. Yeah, entering in one way and coming another way. So the butterfly would also represent the Jesus of history and the tomb of death and then the Christ of faith. But definitely the resurrection and taking flight. One was earthbound, the caterpillar is earthbound, right? And then the butterfly takes flight, so it's another symbol of resurrection. Does that make sense for you? Traditionally, the butterfly would appear in a lot of artwork dealing with resurrection, and it holds a lot of lessons for us, so if we can remember that. I'm hoping that we can remember that God does miracles with very, very tiny things. Caterpillar that fits on the head of a pin. There is nothing too insignificant for God. Amen? And you are important to God. So don't think there's somebody else that's more important and that you don't matter. You matter. Then the caterpillar shedding its skin all those times. How many times have you evolved? Okay, if you we're drawing a map of your life, and those who are creating a life that matter in CLM, you remember that song, I Will Change Your Name from CLM, and you also know that we used to do that, draw a life map. How many times have you been through some changes? Let me ask you even just more simply, how many of you have had more than one career in your lifetime? There you go. Think about that, about shedding some skin and growing into a new career, another career. That might be one way. And then how has that impacted you in your spiritual understandings as you have entered into different careers? You've interacted with people differently, you've had different job responsibilities, so then that changes you, right? So then that changes some of your spiritual worldview as well. I like that in-star, several sheddings. And then, as was said before, the vulnerability. The butterfly gets this one thing, that it spits out this stuff that creates, I can't remember the word, I've lost the word for it, but there is an actual scientific word, so never mind. But it creates this stuff that it sticks on the underside of that twig from which it hangs its body. It secretes it, it like spits it out, and then it attaches itself. And then as that dries, it lets go and hangs upside down. Sometimes we can feel spiritually like we're hanging by a thread. And yet, this caterpillar just hangs there for a couple of weeks. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. So, do you think the weather changes? Or do you think the caterpillar waits? So, like, I've heard the forecast and Dale said it's going to be good for the next 2 weeks. I can now enter into my metamorphosis. Do you think so? No. So, strong winds might come, rains might come, but it hangs there, right? And then we're familiar with the emerging of the butterfly from that chrysalis. But science has spent very little time until more recently talking about what actually happens in that pupa stage, what happens inside that chrysalis. We have a lot more focus on the butterfly itself and on the caterpillar, but not on the chrysalis. You know, because of some of the scientific advances that they've done for even our own medical treatments, they are now able to do 3D scans of a chrysalis, and they have followed them. And so there's some videos that you can take a look at showing evolution. They're still not quite inside. But how they used to do it is they would cut open the chrysalis at different stages, at different dates, which meant a butterfly died every time they did that, so they could learn. And now they're able to do it with other kinds of advances the same way they're able to see into our bodies. Is that not cool? And no butterflies are dying in the making of that video. Thank you, one person laughed, good. All right, so what's going on inside that chrysalis? Well, you're gonna tell me metamorphosis. But what's actually happening? Anybody know? I'm drinking a little, my throat. This was a singing day. Did you notice I sang today? The throat's healing. It's not all there.
That's right.
It's transition.
It's transitioning. Yeah. How's it doing that?
Growth.
Growth. Well, first of all, the caterpillar actually sort of disintegrates and becomes goop. Messy goop. Have you been there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You just feel like you're goop. You feel like nothing good could come out of this. You feel like you're really at the pit. But then there's something that are called imaginal cells or imaginal discs. Microscopic. Imaginal cells. There's an imaginal cell for each one of the 4 wings of the butterfly, and the butterfly actually does have 4 wings. There is an imaginal cell for the antenna. And by miracle of grace, by miracle of God, those imaginal cells start to divide and multiply and start to grow in the goop. In the goop. It's not like there's a caterpillar and then there's a butterfly. There's goop and then there's weird things that are growing that nobody can identify yet, except we know the end result. Hello? Spiritually, we often know the end result. We know what a Christian, what we want to look like. We know that if we're like Jesus or following Jesus, we get that. But there's times, people, when we may be virtually unrecognizable. We may be pretty goopy. But God may be growing those cells within us. And the wings are beginning to form. Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me? Does it happen overnight? In the scheme of things, it might feel like it, but it's about 2.5 weeks for the caterpillar to the butterfly. 2.5 weeks for those cells to grow from nothing and from that goop. That goop actually feeds it. So the monarch butterfly is actually fed by the body of the caterpillar. Does that make sense? The past feeds the future. Does that say something to you? Sometimes we think of the past as bad. It's over. Well, it is over. But it has a purpose, doesn't it? There are all kinds of enzymes that are in that caterpillar tissue, and they're released. And it becomes this rich, fertile food and fuel, yeah. So that new creature starts to eat up what once was. I'm going to say spiritually, it starts to understand what once was differently. And it helps lead to the creation of the new. Does that make sense? Saul had to make such a journey. Saul had to change to Paul. And because many of us know the Bible story, we simply have Saul and then Paul. And we have a tendency to say Saul is bad, Paul is good. I'll come back to that point in a minute. But the transition for Saul to Paul may have seemed overnight to us, or it may seem in a few verses in Scripture, but it's not immediate. It's a process. The encounter on the road, being struck blind. When he is struck blind, he loses his former self. Is that true? This was a strong, educated man who was a leader of a movement, the anti-Jesus movement, because he was a Pharisee, he was a scholar, he was an enforcer of the law. Does that make sense? To be struck blind was to lose some of his sense of leadership. He felt lost. He's taken into town, and he has a dream that says he's going to talk to Ananias. Can you imagine how scary that would be? And the other people don't know how to respond to him. We don't know how to respond to a chrysalis, because for us, nothing's happening there. It's not a butterfly, and it's not a caterpillar. It's just a thing hanging there, and it's not particularly pretty. Ananias did not know how to respond to Paul. What he knew of Paul was he was a threat. Needed a pesticide, get rid of Paul. Paul thought Ananias was a threat and wanted a pesticide on Ananias. Right? But Ananias ends up being the one who helps Paul find that grace. We talk about the conversion on the road of Damascus, but isn't there a conversion experience that really happens with Ananias? When Paul and Ananias meet, and Ananias lays hands on him, and Paul sees again, and Paul starts to see differently. Now, if we would continue reading on in Scripture, we find out that the disciples did not want Paul, that the disciples had the same kind of reaction as Ananias. Why? Because they couldn't see Paul, they saw Saul. And even though his name was changed, the experience of him had not yet been changed. You can say you're a Christian, but until somebody has the experience of you, they may still think you're the other person, right?
Right.
So let me go back to that moment when I said we say Saul's bad, Paul's good. We have a tendency in our world to think in binary form. Good, bad, right? Black, white. We don't think of the space in between. Is that true?
Sure.
We think caterpillar, butterfly. We don't think chrysalis. We don't think pupa. That's not where we think. We think male, female. We don't think gender fluid. Am I speaking the truth?
Yes.
We don't think about transformation or metaphor or metamorphosis. We think in these particular ways. And when we do that, we have a tendency to make one bad and one good. And it's usually the one that we are or the one we want to be is good and the other is bad. Am I speaking the truth?
True.
Come on now. If I was going to ask you about political parties, and I'm not going to, but if I did, whichever party you're in would be the good one. Whichever party the other people are in would be the bad one. Is that true? See how we do that? And the truth is, there's a lot more people that are in a pupa stage in our country, right?
Oh,
And we need to see what might emerge. Think about those dualities. We think about night and day. Day is the good time. That's that's when things grow. Now, some of you are night owls, but if we went back much earlier, before the invention of electricity and air conditioning,
Right.
activity happened in the daytime, and you rested at night. Now, because we have artificial light, we've lost our own sense of night and day. It's time. But if we talk about that binary, night and day, and if we look at it more carefully, there's not just night and day, because there's a transition from every night into every day, and from every day into every night, is there not? Twilight and dawn. There's a stage of movement from one to another. We can't understand one without the other, but we can't get to them without moving through that middle ground.
Right.
Amen? You and I have transformation that we go through, metamorphoses that we go through. We are meant to evolve biologically and spiritually. Think about it. You were a baby in arms, right? Then you're a toddler fighting for your own independence. Well, your parents were protecting you. Don't touch that plug, don't touch that stove. And then you start to be a young child. And then you're a preteen, oh dear. And then you're a teen, oh my. And then a young adult and an adult. Do you think the same way at all those stages?
No.
Have you evolved? Has your spiritual viewpoint changed?
Yes.
Do we have a little of the grace that was discussed over here flowing into our wings to help us fly? Hmm? There is a change that happens for us. In the past, being a baby was not bad. It informs us. And those different experiences we have will change us, right? To who we are now. But it does not make the past bad. We may feed on the experiences of the past in becoming the person that we're becoming. Right? I believe Paul drew on all of that past education he had. He drew on his Jewish heritage. That's part of why he became such a prolific writer and teacher. It's because his education that once had fueled opposition was now used for mission, for education. When we talk about the church itself and talk about even our own congregation, we go through stages of development. Where do you think this congregation is at right now? I think we're in the goop. And you might not like the goop,
Sorry.
but you have to be in the goop in order to fly, Yeah. in order to have that resurrection of the butterfly. Amen?
Amen.
It doesn't make what happened before bad. It doesn't make this bad. And it doesn't make the next better even. It's just different. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I want you to feed on some of our past experiences, not in terms of grief, but in letting them feed you to say, what was most important about that? Not just, I liked that building, or I liked when there were more people here, or what spiritually nurtured? What do you carry with you from that time? That's different than what you miss. What do you carry with you? Are you preparing for something else, or do you just want to go back to Egypt? Right? That's a different whole story, but you with me?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. An author, I think her name is Trina Poland, said, how does one become a butterfly? And the answer was, you must want to fly so much that you're willing to give up being a caterpillar. I think that speaks to the church. Not just our church, but the church in the Western world in particular. Yeah? Do you not see what the Pope is doing with making small incremental changes?
Amen.
Small incremental changes.
Yeah.
Metamorphosis is happening in the Catholic Church.
Thank you.
It's happening in individual congregations. Some people are stuck on being a caterpillar, and so they don't want to be anything else, and so they're just closing their doors. But we have to go through the goofy phase to see what else God may create of us. Do you think the caterpillar has a clear vision of what it will be?
No.
I don't think so. I think it's just, I'm a caterpillar and I'm in the moment. And that makes it difficult. If we can't say exactly what it's going to look like, it becomes difficult for people, right? I'm going to switch metaphors on you again. Have you ever been around quilters? Have you ever gone underneath a quilting frame?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What's happening underneath the quilting frame?
Goo.
Goop, yep. It's very chaotic on the underside of a quilting frame. When you're quilting, on the top side is this beautiful design. But if you're on the underside, it's a mixture of threads going every which way, right? There is a mess to quilting. And then the whole thing gets sewn together and produces this gorgeous quilt, right? Take a look at one if you haven't seen them. If I would go back in some time, so I'm feeding on a past experience, quilts were actually made from scraps. They weren't made from, I'm going out and I like that fabric and I like that fabric. They were actually made from scraps. And so something that someone thought was going to be thrown out was transformed into something beautiful, valuable, and gave warmth, practical. Right?
Right.
Something else always happens with that kind of quilting, and that was community. Because in an earlier time period, people quilted together. You didn't quilt just by yourself. And it may be that people were assigned to make their own square, and then you brought your square from your scraps, and you got together with the other people who brought their squares, and none of you knew what it might look like till you all got together, because no one knew exactly what shapes and what colors they had brought. Have you seen wonderful quilts like that? Then we started wanting to control it a little bit more, and so we came up with all the beautiful patterns, right? Everyone had to make a pattern. There's a danger in the church sometimes when we try to pattern the church, rather than take each of the pieces that we have, each of the life experiences, and start to see what God will emerge. Make sense? A quilt that God is making that's completely different. Each of us being responsible for bringing our piece to the whole. Each of us trying to share our own life experience and what God is doing with us now in the whole community. And then as a community, we figure out how those pieces best fit together. And you have something to contribute, something of value. When we did our Lenten posters recently for the series, right, and we had them up here, and all of you had colored on them. And nobody told you what colors to use. Nobody said who could work on it, they were just there. And you produced gorgeous posters over the series of Lent. Did you like them?
Yes.
Did you enjoy doing them?
Yes.
Did you see the beauty you did together? As a leader, the only thing I did was provide the frame. Made sure you had a poster and markers. But then you came together and created the art. That's what we're doing, church. And it can be messy at first, and you can look at it and say, I don't know, I'm not sure I like the color she's using there. Oh, you might. But when you give each other enough room, all of a sudden it starts to come together, doesn't it? It was beautiful. We mixed the metaphor one more time. We sang the song Oceans earlier, and I talked about us being tossed on those oceans, and the song itself talked about that too. We can think of the ocean as being one thing, and yet the truth of it is that the ocean has so many pieces to it, and it's constantly in motion, right? There's parts of the ocean that are shallow, parts that are deep. There's parts of the ocean that we don't yet know how deep they are. We have all kinds of studies on the aquatic life, and yet we keep discovering new forms of aquatic life that live at some of these depths that we just begin to explore. There's still new things there. It's incredibly diverse. When we talk about the waters of baptism, like there's one baptism, there's one water, there's water, and yet there's so many forms even of water. Liquid, frozen, vapor, there's so many forms. Still one water, one baptism, but there is so much within us. And when we bring our pieces together, it creates something new. The ocean is constantly in motion. And sometimes we want the church to be this rock, because we love that metaphor, but God gave us other metaphors. Other metaphors. Transformation and change, constantly evolving. And that's what we're invited to do. Invited to grow. Invited to enter into the goop and see what God may be doing with us. To share our insights one with another. To let grace flow into our wings until we're able to take flight. We do that individually, we do it collectively. And as we do it collectively, then we start to reach out with other churches and do it with them as well, with the larger body. Do you want to be a butterfly, or are you content being a caterpillar?
Butterfly.
Are you willing to be in the group
Oh, yeah.
with each other? And see what somebody's like, I'm not sure. Willing to be in the group together, knowing that there's imaginal cells. I believe there's imaginal cells in each one of you.
Amen.
Of what can be, and that God is bringing those into life. In you, in me, in us together. And what shall be yet, we can't see. But it's worth hanging in there to see. Amen.
Amen.
I'm going to invite